Hello and welcome to Fruits of the Spirit. Today I'm answering a question, and that question is, what does the Bible mean by labor of love, as we see in Hebrews chapter 6 verse 10? Let's start by looking at the verse. For God is not unrighteous to forget your work and labor of love, which ye have shewed toward his name, in that ye have ministered unto the saints, and do minister. Now, before I dive into the main discussion, I'd like to quickly point out that the word saints in this case does not only refer to the apostles. If you read Romans chapter 15 verses 25 and 26, and Philippians chapter 1 verse 1, you'll see the word saints is used to refer to all Christians, or to all members of Christ's church. But in verses like Daniel chapter 7 verse 18, it's referring solely to the apostles, a special class of people who God has appointed to minister to Jesus Christ, according to Luke chapter 6 verses 12 to 13, Acts chapter 2 verse 1 to 5, and Romans chapter 8 verses 29 and 30. So what labor of love exactly does the book of Hebrews speak about? Well, there are two ways we can see it. One way of showing this love is to offer assistance to those who God has anointed to do his work. It could be monetary assistance, or also helping them to achieve what God has called them to do. A great example of someone who offered this kind of support is the Shunammite woman. In 2 Kings chapter 4 verses 8 to 11, she took upon herself to make a room for Elisha, so that any time he was coming by, he could lodge there and have somewhere to lay his head. She did so because, as she said in verse 9, she perceived that Elisha was a holy man of God. St. Paul, in his epistle to the Philippians, advised that they render such assistance to those who labored with him in the ministry, if we read Romans chapter 16 verses 1 to 3, and Philippians chapter 4 verse 3. And St. John said in his third epistle, Beloved, thou doest faithfully whatsoever thou doest to the brethren, and to strangers, which have borne witness of thy charity before the church, whom, if thou bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well. Because that for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such, that we might be fellow helpers to the truth. 3 John verses 5 to 8. As Hebrews chapter 6 verse 10 says, God does not forget such supports we offer to his servants, but when the time is right, he will reward our charity. Jesus confidently made this promise to us in Matthew chapter 10 verse 42. And whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water, only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. The other thing we should do is to help our fellow brethren in the faith that may be struggling with their worship. We can offer advice that will help them overcome whatever temptation or challenges they are facing. As St. Paul told us, Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye, which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Galatians chapter 6 verse 1. And he added in verse 10, As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. We can also seek to improve their faith by showing an example, so that they can watch us do the will of God and deal with our own spiritual challenges. Christ described it as a light that shines to them in Matthew chapter 5 verse 16. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. This requires sacrifice and a sense of selflessness, especially if we forfeit or forego certain forms of enjoyment so that our fellow brethren can gain by walking in our footsteps. Parents do the same thing by being a good role model to their children, and we can make similar sacrifices for those who can benefit from our work. Jonathan's brotherly love towards David is a befitting example. Although he was the prince of all Israel, he saw it as his duty to protect David from the evil his father, Saul, intended to do to him. and he was fine with God making David king instead of himself. He told David, "Fear not, for the hand of Saul, my father, shall not find thee, and thou shalt be king over Israel, and I shall be next unto thee. And that also Saul my father knoweth." 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 17. In summary, there are two ways we can show this labor of love. We can render support to those who God has called to do his work, and we can also help our fellow brethren who share our desire to please God but require assistance. It's like being the oldest child in a family. There is the way the oldest child shows love to their parents by doing what they ask and helping them in the family, and there's also a way they show love to their younger siblings by helping them to succeed and learn new skills. And that's the end of the answer for what does the Bible mean by labor of love, as we see in Hebrews chapter 6 verse 10. Please consider liking or subscribing if you enjoyed, and click the notification bell if you want to see when next I post. Have a good rest of your day.